Okay. Okay, here we are at our extra special bonus session. It's Paul Pantone. It's hard to introduce somebody like Paul Pantone because he really exemplifies the ideal that his achievements are his credentials. I met him back in the mid-90s and just got to watch from the sidelines as he gradually developed a reputation for solid production, solid integrity. He just does his job, and he does it incredibly well. He tells me he's an ordinary guy just like all of us, and that gives all of us hope, because Paul has done something very extraordinary in developing the GEET system and making it as dependable and as distributable as it is. And so, without any further ado, here's Paul Pantone.
Thank you. I hope that the wireless mic picks me up as I walk around, because I do a lot of walking as I move around. First of all, I'd like to say a special thank you to Steve Ellswick, who 12 years ago convinced me that I should come to a science conference. And I reluctantly went to the first one. And after 2 days of people walking by my booth, ignoring me, on the middle of the second day, I was the speaker. I got up on stage and I ran the original engine, which is at my booth. We called it Big Blue. And on stage, we ran the engine for about 400 people on crude oil. I had an assistant at the time who held a white handkerchief over the exhaust pipe while we ran the engine, and he passed that out into the audience. There were many scientists and engineers there that knew that if you put oil or crude oil in a gasoline engine, you're going to get clouds of black smoke. It didn't take long for that crowd to realize that if you could run an engine on crude oil and have no pollution coming out the tailpipe, that there must be something to it. After our presentation, during the lunch break, I went outside the hotel, and we ran it for the scientists that wanted to see the engine running on 80% salt water and 20% crude oil. After that, we ran it on 80% salt water mixed with battery acid, which even ran cleaner. Some of the people came back to my booth and watched it on the video we had, and it showed on the video at a smog station in California, we were able to have 21.1% oxygen coming out the tailpipe running on crude oil, with 0 carbon monoxide, 0 carbon dioxide, and 0, 1, and 2 parts per million hydrocarbon. After the test, and between each one of the tests, we pulled the sniffer out and held it up in the air to show people what the pollution level in the shop was. We were producing more than 1% more oxygen out the tailpipe, and the hydrocarbon level in the shop was 3 to 5 parts per million with a peak of 7. So we were literally cleaning the air up by running an engine. The people from the State of California Air Quality Control Board that came there to calibrate the equipment to make sure it was accurate walked out after the first test and said, "This is physically impossible, we don't want anything to do with it." That was in 1992 and should have told me something. Molly and I got together in 1995, and the biggest drawback I had in 1995 was the same one I had in 1983. People would come up to me and say, "How does it work?" And I'd smile and say, "It works." I didn't know why it worked. I knew how to build them all day long. You put this piece in here, you hook these things up here, and you start the engine. It works. What more do you need to know? Well, the reason I couldn't apply for a patent for all those years is the patent attorney said you have to have a description, an abstract, claims. I said, "It works. It reduces pollution 99%. What more can I say?" He said, "How does it work and why?" It was a few years later, after Molly and I got together, that I started listening to what my wife was saying when she started telling me some of the different phenomena that she was understanding. In 1996, we went to Las Vegas. The United Nations had a conference down there. MIT and a lot of other people were there. It was a packed conference. About a third of the people there spoke Russian. A lot more spoke German, and it was a few Americans. First prize for that week of anybody that could show they could clean up pollution the best was supposed to be $100,000. 1 hour after we gave our demonstration on Wednesday in the middle of the conference, the sign saying there was a first prize was removed and canceled. And Dr. Bendak, who was in charge of the United Nations New Technology Division, came over and said, we were going to be partners. I said, no, we aren't. I do not work with government agencies. I will not work with military. I want to work with people to clean up the pollution problem and give them better mileage. He was highly offended, but the award was never issued. A couple of the professors from there in November of 1999 released on the internet that they had been awarded a patent for what they call the Plasmatron. Some people call it the MIT Plasmatron. The biggest difference, and the only difference, between their unit and my unit is in my claims I said my device fits any and all pieces of equipment that use fuel. I use waste heat from a furnace, or in this case, a car. The exhaust pipe goes in here, goes one direction, and the new vapor goes through the other direction and becomes a new fuel that is clean and efficient. What they did different was they put a heater here and a little fan behind it. Oh, it's a totally different invention. Wrong. Once they posted that on the internet, they were attacked from all over the world. Other university professors that had taken the time to come out and meet me and my wife, they got on the internet saying, no, 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 no. MIT didn't invent this. This is Paul Pantone's GEET technology. You're stealing it. Well, you don't see MIT selling their kits. They're now calling it an emission reduction device, not a fuel delivery system. But we can go into that one later. To be told I can get up here for 45 minutes to 50 minutes is really difficult for me because I've gotten used to, over the years, giving 8-hour to 40-hour lectures of teaching people from start to finish everything I can about GEET technology and how it applies to other technology. If I were to sit down with all the other inventors that have made presentations today, many of the discoveries that we have made apply to what they're doing, only we've been able to chart it out so you can physically understand what is happening. But we don't do it with big, long algebraic formulas. We do it at 4th and 5th grade level. In early 2001, after many hardships that we've gone through with bad management and thieves that have come in when we're not here to take things that aren't theirs, my wife and I applied to the state of Utah to be a school of higher education. Don Carpenter was the director for the Board of Regents. He came out to our school. He was not pleased to hear that I was a 9th grade dropout. And I'm teaching people higher education. That didn't go over very well. But when he got to our school and walked up to the first test bench on the second day of classes, our classes went Monday through Friday, he walked up to the first test bench, and there's a small engine that had just been run. There were 3 NASA scientists standing at that table with another high school dropout. And he sees their student badges, which we did by color. He didn't know the difference. He thought these were our teachers. He said, why didn't you tell me you had qualified physicists teaching? And I laughed and said, no, these are our students. He said, well, who's the teacher? I said, well, I teach the first day and I show them how it all works together. And then my teacher here, who's a 12th grade dropout, he is the instructor in the classroom to show them how to put it together. And he looked at these scientists, and the first one was Dr. John Sutton. And he says, did you pay $1,500 to be here for a week? He said, well, yeah, and Paul doesn't charge enough. He should charge $5,000. For what he taught me about physics that is real, workable, and applies today, you can't learn in any other university in the country. And it goes far beyond what's in our books. His 2 colleagues agreed. 25% of our students that have come here from around the world hold engineering degrees or PhDs. And most of them with PhDs are physicists. They have a ball in the classroom because this doesn't apply to anything they've ever seen. They know it works. They can play with it. We're going to be going through some of the slides now of the different things we have discovered. But first I need to explain, why did we give away the plans on the internet? Many investors that wanted to invest in us came to us saying, why on earth do you think I'd invest in you if you gave these away on the internet? My wife and I received a call from a local group of investors who had contacted some prince and some aides, I guess there were OPEC people in a place called Kuwait. And in 1999, we got a call back saying these people from Kuwait were flying their plane in and wanted to come to our house for a meeting. We agreed to it. We immediately posted this on the internet. They came to our house and wanted to know, after they saw the engine blowing, the exhaust was blowing their towels up off their head all over the place with no exhaust, no pollution. They wanted to know if they could buy it and keep it on a shelf. And my wife and I said, no, it belongs to mankind. We're here to try to get it there in a non-disruptive way. We explained that the plans we put on the internet would teach anybody in the world how to do it, but it's very specific. We said it's for personal use, not competition, not commercialization, for education. You could put it on one engine for free, up to 20 horsepower. But we also included in those plans the system of the bubbler. There are only very specific conditions where a bubbler would ever be used. But the way we designed this system, it is the worst model we ever built in 25 years. And if you tried to put this on a car, guaranteed you're not going to be getting double and triple the mileage unless you're on a flat road, no bumps. You got a lot of money to build the system. The system that worked on cars was totally different. We put this up there, and it threw a lot of the copycats out in left field. We had one gentleman, he's in the audience right now from Germany. He took these plans, put it on his diesel generator, and couldn't get it to run right. The reason was you don't want to heat up the fuel prior to delivery. And as we go through the pictures, you'll understand why. After the OPEC people found out we had put this on the internet, they said, how do you see us being friendly to you if you can't sell it out to us? I said, after all the government agents and other people we've met, and big corporation people we've met, if we only come out with something that's 70% improvement in mileage, not any higher than that, maybe double, but that's it. We don't want to push the window too far. You'll be given twice the reserves because your fuel is going to go twice as far. And we already talked to a lot of the other corporations and government entities that have said, we're just going to raise the price. The higher we raise the price, the more the customers are going to be pushed to you. And as long as you're just one man with a small company moving forward, you're not a threat to us. If anything happens to you, and all the people that know how to build it know that you can't stop them from patent infringement, then we've got to put out hundreds and hundreds of fires. We don't want that. We'd rather have to deal with one person. So because of that, they prayed to Allah before they left my house that Molly and I live a long, healthy life and continue upon our path slowly. I thought that was nice of them. We parted as friends, I guess, and they have never bothered me. The only people we've had a problem with were ex-employees and people that were just so greedy they weren't happy with giving us 2% of the net profits or the gross and taking over the business and running with it. Because I don't want to be a businessman. I never did want to be a businessman. I would like to see a successful businessman come up to the table and say, Paul, here's a house for you and your wife. Here's enough money for you guys to get by on. Invite all the inventors you know in and chart out everything you can. That's what I do best. I'm a teacher. So because of this, that's when we started going into the theory of why does it work, how does it work, so we could tell our patent attorney what we're going to patent. In our patent, it says very clearly that this device fits any and all pieces of equipment that use fuel. I don't think you could get a patent that's much more broad than that. We've had a lot of people that have come back to Molly and I in the last few years that have said, boy, you lied to us. You said this back then. Well, please keep in mind that an invention is something new. And what you believed to be the truth 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is going to be subject to change because there's more and more discoveries. This was the first engine that we started shipping around the world. These little demo engines, which we have one out front, we have put in pickle juice, Mountain Dew, you name it. We have some newspaper articles we're going to show in a few minutes of different kids that have used this as science projects. But these little engines went all over the world, and one after another, teachers from colleges, high schools, and junior high schools would get a hold of us and say, we're not allowed to demonstrate this in a public school. My wife and I decided the only way we were going to get the technology out was to drive around the United States and make presentations, as many as we could, and we did for 3.5 years. We did find that there's a magnetic field, which explained a major mystery that I had that I didn't know why it worked. But one day I'm at my work booth, and it's a 4-foot by 8-foot table, and the only outlets were on one side. And one of my employees said, hey, can you move the generator to the other side of the table and do your test over there so I can get to the outlets? I've got some work to do. And I said, yeah, no problem. Well, as I grabbed the generator, which was right in the middle of doing a test, I started to turn it so I could reach it from the other side of the table. And as I did, I looked over at the analyzer, and I see the numbers changing. I pulled it back around. The numbers went down. So I sat there playing with the generator in all directions, and the rest of the day, that's all I did. I didn't care about fuel consumption, just why are the numbers changing? Because back in 1983, 84, when I was first doing my testing, I could take it to your shop, and it'd have zero pollution. I could take it across the street, and it'd only have 90% less pollution. Take it up the street 3 blocks, and I'd actually be getting better air out the tailpipe in the room. I didn't know why. So for all those years, I was mystified as to why does it keep changing? What am I doing different? Well, finally, as I turned that machine back and forth with a compass, and I found out that where the exhaust first hits, if this is the exhaust coming down and the rod for fuel is going up, where they first make contact, if that is pointed due north, you get the most efficiency. Then I could have cleaner air than the air we're breathing. But I didn't know it for all those years. But that only led to about 40 more discoveries. The first time I took my wife to a conference was a Tesla conference over in Denver, and I was asked to give a 3-hour lecture. 1 hour into that lecture, and we had 13 cameras on us that day, ABC had set up a studio about half the size of this back wall behind a curtain so they could film it all. And I asked them, why do you have all this equipment? Are you going to put us on TV? And they said, no. You have made it further with your technology than any other inventor in fuel before you. And just in case you won't give us an interview if you do make it, we got footage. So we'll be able to put together our own interview of you, whether you like it or not. Because most inventors that do succeed finally get burned out to the point they don't want to do another interview. They don't want to see the news media. Well, we get an hour into the program, and I stopped and I said, are there any questions in the audience? And not one hand came up. I'm looking around thinking 350 people packed in this room, standing room only in the back, and not one person has a question? Something's wrong. Well, I asked again, are there any questions? Still no hands came up. When my wife saw I was getting choked up and a little nervous, she jumped up from the front row and she said, I don't have any questions, but I have something I'd like to say. So as she came towards me at the podium, I said, here's Molly. I gave her that microphone and stepped back. The next 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, I could not believe what I was hearing coming out of her mouth when she looked out to the audience and said, you all look like you're a bunch of overeducated bookheads. I'm, oh God, she didn't really say that, no. And she said, if you don't have little ladders, you can't even see out of your box. If it isn't in a book, you don't understand it. And the more she's talking, the only thing I can visualize at this point is ropes going over the beams. I'm never going to be invited to anything scientific again. I mean, she's just destroying us. What is she doing? So after she tore them up a little bit, she turned around and drew a picture. I hope it's on this clip. No, now we need to go to the other pictures there. But she drew a picture on the board, which we'll get to here in a little bit, of thermal inertia. Yeah, go ahead and switch over. And she explained her feelings on what was happening, and when she was done, after tearing him up for 15 minutes, she apologized for any hardships, if anybody took what she had to say offensively. She got a 5-minute standing ovation. But the thing that got me is most of these guys in the audience had PhDs or engineering degrees, and one after another, I saw them taking their badges off and hiding their badges inside the coat pocket. And for the next 2 days, they came up to the booth to meet Molly, and none of them said, "I'm Dr. So-and-so." They all came up and said, "Hi, Molly, I'm John. I'm George. My friends call me Pete." And for about 3 months, we were getting calls from all these different scientists. And they were all asking for Dr. Molly. I'm going, "Wait a minute, guys, this is my invention. What do you mean, Dr. Molly?" "Well, she knows more about it than you do, so put your wife on the phone." Well, the first one she invented or discovered was when she went on to, it's not on this page, I'm sorry. I've got it here. But after a while, she came up with another invention. I'm going to have to skip around, but this one here. When she held the rod up at the show, she kept saying, "Everything we have discovered is in the book of Ezekiel. We just have to understand what he was saying." And I love my wife very much, and I'd smile. And after the first few times that she proved to me she was right, I shut up and listened. And this one day, we were down in Las Vegas area doing a convention, and the guy at the next booth had Kirlian photography and these little plates you put your hand on. You can see the different colors, your aura of what's wrong with you. And she handed me the little rod, and she said, "I'll bet you what's on this rod is a human aura." Well, science knows that auras come from living plants, living tissue, not metal. I wasn't going to argue with Molly at this point because she had proven that she was right too many times, so I went over and I put the rod down on the Kirlian photography plate, and lo and behold, it has the most beautiful blue, cobalt blue aura I'd ever seen. The guy who owned the booth, immediately as I'm walking off, is taking off his watch, his keys, everything he's got that's metal. He's throwing it down on the plate, and nothing has an aura. He came over and bought one of the rods just so he could show that to people, because nobody's going to believe a piece of metal can have an aura. But time after time, she kept going back to the book of Ezekiel and Isaiah, and she'd say, "Honey, according to the Bible, he says that as the vapor was pulled to the north, energy is pulled into itself." Well, some good old boys down there in Florida got together, and these scientists tested it at their home, and they found out that there is electrons being pulled as far as 60 feet away into this energy field. The next page. They at first were very willing to share their results, but they were not allowed to do any testing at the university. Now, we've heard from some of the universities in Europe they have done testing, which we'll be showing you some of those results later or at the booth if I run out of time. And we have been able to document many of the phenomenon at different universities, but none of them actually in a university in the United States that's willing to talk. When I went to Brigham Young University and asked them if we could do a test, they said yes, we were allowed in 2 days, but not to talk about it publicly, so I'm not going to talk about it publicly. But the same tests were documented over in Paris and Germany. When they were doing the tests, they keep coming up with this funny thing that's somewhere between hydrogen and helium. Hydrogen has an atomic weight of 1 and explodes. Helium, 4. Ours implodes and it has an atomic weight around 2. What is it? I'm not a physicist. I don't need to know. All I need to know is that when I start my engine up, the engine runs 30% cooler. I can go 10 times longer between oil changes, and I can take a little 10 horsepower engine and get 10 times the life out of it without ever changing the oil. The original engine I built in 1983 is here on display, 7,000 hours on it without an oil change, and it's like brand new inside. We have tested gas and diesel engines. Next page. Actually, skip all the little ones. Let's go to the bigger pictures or the next group, because I know I'm not going to have enough time.
Should we skip this one?
Yeah. Next one. Next one. This picture came to us from Germany a while back. He had taken the plans and he decided he was going to go ahead and run it on gasoline and water mixed using a detergent, fed through a small metering device through a reactor rod. This is a torch flame if you look at the color picture at the booth. This is a small pump. Gasoline normally detonates at 1270 degrees. This flame got over 2100 degrees, and by turning up the speed of the pump, you can get this up to exceeding 6,000 and 7,000 degrees. The more water you add to it in the emulsion, the hotter the flame can be, which ties back again close to the same results you're going to get from a Brown's gas machine, which neither one have been charted and overlaid yet. A lot of research is needed. Next picture. My wife and I were invited down. A friend said he had a buddy down there at Desert Research Institute. We can come down and meet with him. Desert Research Institute gets between $2 to $8 million a month, depending on the season and grant money and all, so they can study pollution problems, so they can study weather, so they can study water. And when we got there, I told him, I said, I have one of the Nikola Tesla weather machines in the trunk of my car. Would you like to see it? He said, no. I said, we have a few other devices on water. We went to a conference and met 50 of the world experts that they claim that they have devices that can replicate the frequency of the water found at Lourdes. Would you like to see this? He said, no. I said, how about ways of purifying water? No. He said, you don't realize everything you and your company represent would put us out of business. Oh. But he still helped us get in at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas to do one test one time and get off campus. So I sent 2 of my men down with one of my generators that we had retrofit that was getting triple the mileage or runtime per the same identical load to factory. Before they made it down to the university to do the test, they took it upon themselves to change the settings on everything without having an analyzer there. Oh, I'm sorry, that's like trying to tune a car up by ear. Good luck. Well, they changed it to the point where instead of getting triple the runtime, they only got a 70% increase in runtime. Made me very dissatisfied, and I fired both of them the next day. But it still was better than anything the University of Nevada in Las Vegas had ever tested as far as an engine. Next picture. Now, we wanted to know what was really happening because we understood it worked. So we built one out of glass. We've built about 9 of them so far out of glass. The exhaust came in here, went through the chamber and back out over here. The new fuel came up the center here. And this rod sits in the center of that inner chamber. So we could visually see what was happening. Well, when that rod's in there and the unit's running, there were lightning bolts from here to here. And at this end was about a half-inch ball of pure white light called plasma. And there have been many other inventors here that can demonstrate plasma. Dr. Sonny Ward, the first time I saw his plasma device, his implosion machine where he could drop the stainless steel coins, whatever, down in there, and poof, it's gone into a puff. We're all infringing on that same envelope of knowledge. But without us comparing notes and getting together once every few months to share the discoveries we've made, it's slowing us all down. We need to work closer together as brothers. I don't want Sonny's invention. I want to see it get to the marketplace. When we first started talking about the fact that we think we can get rid of atomic waste using a combination of his machine and mine, because his vaporizes atomic waste and mine would use the vapor to run an engine so that nothing would go into the atmosphere, I got some calls from people that said, you would be costing a lot of people a lot of money that are storing all this waste. We don't want you to do that. We don't want you to get rid of atomic waste or medical waste on site. There's too much money in this politically. Back off. Next picture. These 2 young men went to class, built their little engine. It's just the same as the one I have outside, only they had to put a wire screen around their reactor so nobody could touch it and get burned. They're 11 years old. One of the boys' fathers called me while they were giving their demonstration. He called me from the hallway on his cell phone and he said, Mr. Pantone, my son and his friend are running this engine for a science fair, and the teacher would not let them bring gasoline into the classroom. So they poured in the pickle juice and Windex. Teacher would not let them bring gas into the classroom for the judges. So the boys grabbed the top of the engine, turned the switch on, and said, and if our teacher would have let us bring gasoline in so we could run on 20% gasoline, All we would have to do is pull this rope like this and the engine would start. They pulled the rope and the engine started. These two boys were totally in shock looking at the engine because here it is running, and the inventor said you have to use 20% fuel. Well, ABC was in there with some real nice close-ups. They made the news. I mean, these kids were happy. They were the hits. They won first prize. Next picture. Robin Hermanson is here. If he raises his hand, people can see him. His son, he and his son worked together on this one, and he ran this, and he also won a prize in science. We've had letters like this in newspaper articles from all over the United States, but you never see them back at the same school over and over and over because the schools don't want them. When we toured the United States, we got a hold of every college we could as we traveled, every university, every high school. Would you like to have a demonstration? And one after another, they all said no. I started here in Utah 10 years ago. I went to the governor's office, and Governor Leavitt's office was not interested in looking at the technology, even if it was just sitting outside the door. And after 9 years of their refusing to walk out the door to look at it and showing no interest in cleaning up pollution, who's the best man to run the EPA? Governor Leavitt. We know he won't do his job. Because he wasn't going to do it here, why would he do it on a federal level? I'm sorry, there's a problem in politics. There's too much big money in oil and controlling how much fuel you use. We've taken this and shown this to GM, Ford, Chrysler, and other companies from around the world. What they want is a 10% increase. Nothing more than that. It's too radical. And it gets pretty hard to buck that system when the only people that want it are you and me, the average people who want better mileage and less pollution. We've had comments from people that own oxygen bars down in Los Angeles, and I don't want to mention too many movie stars' names there, but the comment was, this will destroy my oxygen bar business. And it would, over time. But how fast could it really be done? Well, with the kit we have today, if we had today 40,000 mechanics with stalls opened, it would take 7.5 years to hit 70% of the existing cars. We started retrofitting VWs. We went back to the local VW dealer after we made a couple of public appearances in magazines. When we went back there to buy some more exhaust pipes so we could retrofit them, they said, I'm sorry, we don't want your business. Wait a minute, we just want to buy some exhaust pipes. We don't want your business. You don't want to sell me parts? Nope, we can't. If we sell you parts, we may lose our license. Try that with Chevy, Ford, Chrysler, Volvo, all of them. The minute they find out we've got something, they notify the dealers, if you dare put this on a car or work on a car that has this, we're going to cut you off. So now people are afraid to put it on their car because, well, if I put this on my car, I can't even go in and get an oil change. So, yeah, they can pressure a little guy like me to a certain point, but there's a lot of people out there that don't like that pressure. They're willing to change their own oil, and they'll put their hand up and say, I want to buy the rights to open a stall. Those are the people I want to talk to because we're going to start training. We've already trained about 20 people out of the 90 that are signed up. We want them to know how to install this because there's enough people out there that do a lot of driving that would like to have double their mileage. Next picture. This was the picture Molly drew on the board for the Denver group when she got her standing ovation. She explained that if you put a glass of water in a refrigerator that's 38 degrees, that after 25 minutes, that wouldn't even go down 1 degree. Then she explained that if you put the hot water in the same refrigerator, it would freeze. It would drop down to 32 degrees. But when she first asked all these scientists and engineers in that audience, have any of you ever been told by your mommies to use hot water to make ice cubes? Hands came up all over the place. Then she said, did any of you believe your mommies? All the hands went down. And then she drew this and said, this is what's really happening. And then she said, how many of you have ever gone to the store and bought soda pop, milk or something, shoved it in the fridge during the summer, and then all of a sudden you come back about 30 minutes later and there's ice in it? And almost every hand in the place came up. She said, do I need to say more? And everybody's looking around at all the hands sticking up, and they're going, you've said enough, you're right. So they gave her credit for that discovery, and out of the first 62 discoveries we had, 32 of those came from my wife and then got validated by scientists elsewhere. Next picture. We've already hit that, so we'll go to the next picture. If you're using a rod in the chamber and you don't know what the length is for the fuel you want to get rid of, because you're not using just gasoline or diesel, you're using some mixture of junk you have, then you put a 12-inch rod in the chamber and run it. After you've run it for 30 minutes, you pull it out and you check it with a compass starting at the north, and as you bring the compass down, the needle will swing and show you there's a north on the rod. As you bring the compass down the rod, it'll show you where south is, which is this point. The rod will tell you exactly how long it wants to be and where it wants to be positioned. Now, if you're starting at the top end of the rod moving down, and the north actually is way out here, but the rod starts here, that compass will swing into midair and say, north is way up here, past the end of the rod. Now, we have had a couple of times when it's a fresh rod, it holds this very strong charge. And I believe there's somebody here whose camera kind of got messed up. Gene Manning. We've managed to mess up 4 or 5 cameras, and I'm glad you were there for that one and here today. But as we moved the rod and it pointed towards her camera, zapped, the camera was zapped. I'm very careful with the rod now. I keep it away from cameras. I point it up, I keep it up at the podium. But we've had a few occasions where people have had their cameras sitting in front of me and I've made the mistake of putting it down in front of a camera. Or what's even worse, don't put it down on top of your computer. You just lost a hard drive. The magnetic field that it holds will wipe out certain electronic equipment in a very close proximity. While it's confined within the chamber, it creates 9 different types of electric field. We don't want to say EM, we don't really want to say electric, but it's a type of field. During recent testing just a few months ago, one of my guys asked if he could wrap the exhaust pipe with a copper wire, and I said, yeah, give it a try. So he wraps a coil around it, and for every inch of coil around the exhaust pipe, we got 20 volts AC off the exhaust pipe. Reading the ohms from one end of the unit to the other, we showed the vapor coming into the chamber held 10 amps, and coming out was 200 amps. We have just begun to start those tests to find out how we can use that energy, because right now we can physically prove more energy output from the exhaust pipe cover than there is the shaft of the engine that's usable. Next picture. We've already hit this lightly, that there is a ball of light which is pure white at this end of the rod when the rod is running, and electrons are pulled from as far as 60 feet away. The scientists involved in those tests that were scientists from the Florida State University did not do the tests on university campus ground. They did it at their own homes. After the first day of testing, they have refused to share any of their findings with us, so we refuse to share any of our new discoveries with them. But that's typical of American universities. Next picture. When we first began testing, everything was tested north and south with a compass once we realized there was a north and a south. University of Berlin was the first one to call us up and say that they had done an interior testing, or a professor, I should say, from University of Berlin. He tested and said that this end of the rod maintained 32 degrees at the center of the rod in the middle. At this end, it maintained 120 degrees. We asked some people that were working with us down in Sydney, Australia area, and they had facilities in Sydney, Melbourne, and 3 other cities. They did their testing and called back and said the numbers were reversed. So in the northern hemisphere, the north was 32 degrees all the time, and the south was 120. In the southern hemisphere, it was reversed. The north was 120 degrees like the equator, and the south was like the South Pole. During a perfect burn, the exhaust temperature should be the same temperature as the incoming air or ambient air temperature. At that point, you should have a perfect burn and no pollution. Next picture. If we were marketing a device for your car where you could only use gasoline, We only need one exhaust pipe coming down like this, coming up, and one rod coming through the center, the opposite direction. That's all we need. But to give you the opportunity to be able to switch it, we make it a dual system like this, so you can have one length rod for gasoline and the other one for whatever you want. You can use one side just for idle, which is gasoline at 7¼ inches. You can use the other side for throttle or your acceleration, same size rod. But if you are in an area where the water isn't going to freeze, you may want to drop a 2½-inch rod in there and run water through half of it. All of this can be controlled now through our new devices that we have, electronic control, and there is a truck sitting outside that you can look at that was set just to get to this show yesterday. Next picture. You can use a bubbler. The bubbler can be your septic tank, a small bubbler, any size you want to get rid of waste products that you normally would not use as fuel. Next picture. When we realized that in the southern hemisphere, in a horizontal position, that south was 32 degrees, north was 120 degrees, and the reverse up top, we also realized that the electrons, solar flares hitting our atmosphere, have a pattern of being pulled into the center and then being pulled up to the top, which creates lights in the atmospheric condition, which is also the aurora borealis. Any extra electrons hitting down here come in at the south pole, go to the center, and either create a magma ball or a ball of white light. We're leaving that one open for further discussions because there's a lot of people that want to talk about hollow earth. This would explain it. Or magma, which always equals and stabilizes at a specific pressure unless there's a crack or disturbance. Next picture, please. Back in, I can't see the date here, 94. When Molly and I first got together, this is one of the letters we received one afternoon. We received 7 letters that afternoon. We sent about 50 pages by fax back to the EPA. How many of you in here right now have heard of getting EPA approval or EPA certification for a device for a car? Have any of you heard of that? Well, the letter here very clearly states they do not have the legal authority to approve, endorse, or certify anything. It's a voluntary program. The EPA was set up to stop inventors like Al and myself and other inventors in this group. You can't go in front of Congress. If you have something you want presented to our government, you have to go to the EPA and go by their, quote, guidelines for testing. This way they can stop anything they don't want by coming up with new rules week after week after week, and you'll spend millions of dollars jumping through hoops that were unnecessary, but it justifies their having 800,000 employees. We didn't volunteer, but instead, many of these people who wrote these letters, and I did delete this man's name because he was demoted for writing this letter. But we did receive resumes from several people that were directors of different departments of the EPA. The same day. Next picture. Basically, the other side's the same thing. It tells you where that law is found in the code. They have no legal authority to do anything other than say, do you want to volunteer? And that's the last thing in the world I'm going to do is volunteer to any government agency. This gentleman, Christophe Martz, challenged the Arts and Science Academy in France. He wanted to have his engineering degree done in GEET. They said, if you can prove the technology works and there's something new to it, yeah, we'll give you a degree in GEET. He did, and the next few pages, which we'll just roughly skip through here, just to the main pictures. But he did prove it. He built this unit. Next picture. Next picture. He used the computers at the university, did all of his testing at the university, and had witnesses and documented the whole thing. This is a short 8-page summary of what he found. I do have the entire 240-page report that he turned in to get his engineering degree. Next page. This shows the pollution level for hydrocarbon, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide here at the bottom. Next picture. That shows what they were with a GEET on it. Right down at the bottom at 0. Next picture. He validated that if you're using a heat sensor, a pyrometer, that the exhaust coming from the engine going around the rod and the vapor coming in this way below freezing When they got to the center of the rod, there was more heat at the center of the rod than there was exhaust temperature coming out of the engine, showing that it was pulling heat from the engine, which is why the engines run 30 to 40% cooler. Next, oh, he also made this discovery, which nobody had made before him, that is one of his, that after he pulled the rod out using magnometers, he found that the center of that rod continuously spins. Next picture. When he compared hydrogen to the new fuel, he said, our fuel does not explode, it implodes, and more efficiently than hydrogen, which explained to us another mystery that we'd had for years. Why is it that once the engine's running and you got a good clean burn, zero pollution, the spark plug wire jumps off the engine because it's been taken off so many times? It's not even hooked up and the engine runs just as smooth. Why is it we could take the same fuel and run a diesel engine that we use a gas engine for and it doesn't make any difference? Because it didn't explode, it implodes. We didn't know this. But now, listen to all the other inventors before me, and how many of them have talked about implosions? Most of them. Plasma is a new field of energy. It is not clearly understood. If I have 193 discoveries so far, and I'm not sharing these with universities anymore, how many more would I have if I could bring in Al and Sonny and all the rest of these guys into one playroom with the right equipment? We'd probably have 500 or 600 discoveries in a very short order. Next picture. There are other leads that are on my site that will lead you to the rest of this report if you want it. It is all in French, but if you want it in English, if you send me an email, I will forward you the entire thing. I hope you have a big mailbox. Next picture. That's it, okay. That means I still have 10 more minutes here. This is the kit as far as the reactor chamber. What comes with the reaction chamber are two rods. They are specifically set for what you want to use as a fuel. So if you tell me, Paul, I want to just run gas, I live up in the cold area, that's all I want, gas. I don't want to mess with the water and have it freeze. Well, a good reason for that is that last guy I was saying from France that did that engineering and got his degree there, when we flew him in to the United States to spend 3 weeks with me and my wife at our school, the first day he was here, he converted a case tractor, backhoe, to operate on half water and half gas, not diesel. It was great. We ran it in the shop. It was running clean. Everything was just fine. We opened the door up. He went out and started shoveling snow. How many of you can guess what happened within 5 minutes? The water injector and the water carburetors froze solid. He wasn't thinking, gee, snow on the ground, it's cold outside, water's going to freeze. So it took us 2 hours with hair dryers out there and plastic covers to defrost it so we could bring it back into the garage. Water is a great fuel or additive or complementary fuel to gasoline or diesel, but only in warm climates. People have said, can you add alcohol to it? You don't want to add alcohol to gas or diesel. You can use a small amount of it the way it comes in gas, but alcohol is not very effective as a fuel in GEET. There's a gentleman in Estonia who was getting all the extra alcohol that was being confiscated at the border. And they break the tops off the bottle if you're trying to sneak booze into Estonia, and they pour it in 55-gallon drums. He'd come by once a month. They dump in a little bit of oil to contaminate it, then he could have the booze. He'd take the booze back and use it for power in a generator. The only thing he was concerned about was power for his people in his community, and that's fine. He bought the plans from us, and he has the right to do that. So we still sell plans. We have videos, which are very generic information. A lot of the same things you saw here. There are some video clips from ABC. That's another thing. Why didn't Fox put us on the news yesterday? Well, a gentleman wrote a letter to or got a hold of the police and the family saying that the woman they've been looking for, he's given them directions as to how to find her. And that took precedence over this meeting, as far as the news was concerned. But normally, if I go to the news and say, let me show you how to get double the mileage and 90% less pollution, not one news program in the United States is willing to cover us. If I go to the TV station and say, hey, you want to see the crazy inventor pour pickle juice in the engine? They stand in line to film us. They are only looking at putting us in as that last spot on the news for humor, something to pick up the audience after all the bad stuff they've just talked about. If we cannot be humorous, they don't want us on the news. We hired a production director to come in and film us, do a 2-hour TV special. He took it down to Warner Brothers to show it. He had Discovery, PBS, and Christian Broadcasting there to view it, to see if any one of them wanted to cover it. Discovery said, no, we don't want anything that'll give people freedom like that. We want things that are out of the people's general reach, things that are entertainment, but not something that will really reduce their mileage. We want things that are cost prohibitive, because look at our backers. They don't want this. Christian Broadcasting said, we cannot show anything if it has a political connotation, and this would hurt the government. I mean, $3 billion a week is a lot of money in road tax to start losing. We don't want that. Well, public broadcasting, he looked over at them saying, are you interested? And they said, are you kidding? Look at who gives us our grant money. We don't want to get cut off. No, we don't want your technology. In 1985, until a few years ago, I kept calling and calling and calling Greenpeace, Sierra Club, Wilderness Club, any organization I could. My sister-in-law got me a book of the top 2,200 foundations in America. And I sent them videos in 50-page packages. And then I invited all of them to work with us if they wanted to. The only thing we got back from 2,200 mailings was a few of them that were returned because they closed down, an envelope saying, please put your donation in the envelope. Thank you very much. When we called some of them, we finally got them on the phone. And I said, why aren't you people interested? They said, you don't realize that as long as there are no solutions, we get donations. But with solutions, we're out of business. So no, we don't want technology that works. This is how we buy new cars. This is how we send the kids to college. This is how we buy the wife the new fur. So no, we don't want solutions. Disappear. A few years ago, we did make ABC News out of Portland area. And somehow it slipped through the system, and we ended up getting broadcasts on ABC News throughout the country that night as one of the fillers. The next day, Jay Leno was making a joke about us on TV as he opened his show up saying, yeah, this crazy inventor up in Utah, this guy is leaking in the tank, you know. I mean, it's great for the guys, we all have hoses, but the women, they're making a mess all over the side of the car. Well, that little publicity boosted my website from about 3,000 hits today to 25,000, 30,000 hits a day. So thank you, Jay. The very next morning, Molly and I had been up real late, about 2 in the morning, and she said she was going to get up early and do some work. I could sleep in. 9 o'clock, she comes up the stairs, opened the drapes, and she says, you got a phone call. I said, you got to be kidding me. Let me sleep for another 3 hours. And she said, do you want me to tell William Shatner that? I said, no. I'll be right down. And as I'm getting dressed, I'm like, this is a joke, isn't it? She says, no, really. So I got down, picked up the phone. Instantly, I recognized his voice. And we chatted for 45 minutes. His first thing was, let me introduce you to the director of Greenpeace and Sierra Club and Wilderness Club. I says, been there, done that, got the t-shirt guy. They don't want solutions, they want donations. And there was a long hesitation. He said, that really makes sense. Why on earth would they want a solution? That would put them out of business. When the Exxon Valdez spill occurred, I got a hold of Texaco and the other people I could find anywhere in the oil business and said, I can show you how to clean all those animals up for about 25 cents an animal. Are you interested? And they said, no. I said, why not? They said, because showing these dying animals on TV, the people's hearts are pouring out. They're sending donations in. Are you kidding? We don't want to cure this problem. I said, but it's so simple. All you need is a little Dawn dish soap. Put it in warm water, the same body temperature. Dip the animal in there and rinse it off. It washes off crude oil. And they said, we don't want it. We already knew about it. Yet, now I see on TV, Dawn dish soap's talking about how they're doing this with the Russians. I was doing that back in 1982. And they're finally making some of this public, which is good. So right now, we are looking for people that would like to work with us around the world. The company is up for sale. All licensing rights and marketing rights. I don't want to be in business. I want to be gathering knowledge, which is what I do best. I want to teach those that need to know how to make their invention better. I've seen probably 1,500 inventions come through my door in the last 10 years. And I bite my tongue once in a while because I'm waiting for the right people to come along that have the wherewithal to make these things get out to mankind. Because I don't want to do it, but I still am not going to start just handing the technology away. I want to see organization with the inventors. And most of the inventors I've talked to have said they'd like to see that same cooperation. So we're looking for that right group of companies or the right company that says, Paul, bring us all the inventions you have. We will find places for them. That's the man I want to deal with, or woman. It breaks my heart when an inventor comes in, shows me his invention, and I know how to fix it. He doesn't have the whole invention. With what we have already charted, we can hand him the rest of it and say, here's what you need. Now, can we start marketing this and you go invent some more? Because most inventors hold on to their inventions like this. They don't want to let go of them. They smother their baby until somebody else comes along with something better, and then they're out of business. There are many of you that have tried to work with me over the years. You came to work with GEET, and I had different management companies in place at the time. I'm not going to mention their names, but it was under different names where my wife and I did not have any voting power, signing power, or anything else. We have tried to live up to each and every one of those contracts the best we could. One of those management teams took all the money that came in for all the generators, state distributorships, and they spent it. It's taken my wife and I 7.5 years to fill the orders on the 200 generators that they sold and spent the money. So it has been a little difficult trying to keep up with just having managers. So we're not looking for a manager. We're looking for someone who has the wherewithal behind them so they got something to lose if they try to steal. Because I want to see all the inventors working together as friends and brothers. And we can do that with your help. I know my time is up right now. I'll be out in the yard here showing the small engine. We had it running yesterday on some soda pop and gas and I think some coffee in it. But for now, I want to thank all of you for being here and staying that extra hour to talk to me. We will be talking to anyone who wants to talk business from the time we pack up from here until you have to go home. So any of you that want to talk, let me know as soon as possible. Thank you.